One of the most contentious issues had to do with the comprehensive plan. The citizens really objecting by large numbers, and it passed anyway, to now what's happened with this comprehensive plan, especially as it pertains to high density.
One is what the intent of those changes to the comprehensive plan in 2015, the way the intent was sold, and then the policy impacts themselves. And so this is when I fully believe that a real light was shined on the process in terms of how our government worked at that time, and the folks that were running its personal interests. Ultimately, this is a question of what people believe Colleyville should be. And in the last 10 years, under the previous administration, we've had a mayor whose family's in the real estate business in Colleyville. We've had a P&Z chairman who's in the real estate development business in Colleyville. And we even have senior city staff members who's in the real estate business in Colleyville, and they're making policy decisions basically trying to lead us down a path to a more dense Colleyville, to what I call full-blown urbanism. Sometimes they call it new urbanism. And so the choice really was, do we want to retain the semi-rural character elements in large lots and protect our neighborhoods, or do we want to continue to drop in zero-lot neighborhoods, townhomes, apartments, etc.? And the 2015 comprehensive plan was absolutely a manifesto for increased urbanism and higher density, higher residential density in particular. And we'd seen it already, in the form of 20 different developments that were passed that were not consistent with our own land development code. They were, out of code basically, with the LDC. And so the intent behind, the real intent, not the marketing intent, behind the comprehensive plan in 2015 was to codify those changes, was to change fundamentally change the way that we calculate density, to provide the opportunity to do more of those types of developments in more parts of town, particularly infill redevelopment, not so much even the remaining open space development, but to do more of it, to kind of keep the party going, for that community. And I mean, folks, all you gotta do is look around town and you can see where that was going on. And, so that was one issue, but it was sold as just a vision, not a policy change. Well, it's completely false, right? And so people figured it out, It had a bogus committee that was responsible for, assembling that document. The sitting city council people that were on that committee, including the one that voted with me against that plan in 2015, acknowledged that it was completely a staff-driven plan, with the mayor and a couple of other people. The people that participated in the committee had zero influence over it. And so, again, the policy impacts and what people choose, or how people see Colleyville, and how we want to treat Colleyville going forward in terms of development was one issue. But the other issue was it was just completely disingenuous, the way that it was being marketed. They understood that people weren't telling them the truth. And I think people were as upset about that as the plan itself and the plan impacts. And ultimately, that's why we, had an overwhelming election in 2016. But the bottom line is, for 10 years, the real estate development industry was running this town. They were involved in critical roles in this town, and whether that, one of my pet peeves is when people use government and local government in particular, as a monetization source. And look, that's what was going on here. And the evidence is all around you. The evidence was in that 2015 comprehensive plan. And what you have now is a council with, a number of these citizen servant representatives that have no economic ties, to businesses in the community, and certainly no economic ties, to what happens with real estate development.
Perception sometimes is reality without full disclosure. So tell the viewers about the full disclosure process that came about because of the charter amendment.
As I pointed out earlier, one of the things that we wanted to, with the new council that we wanted to assure is that, we're running a government that isn't self-interested. We actually, as part of the charter amendment, which in fairness, the citizens passed, we recommended that we had a committee, a real committee, that developed those recommendations. The city council approved the recommendations, approved it to go to a charter election, and the largest election in the history of this city. It was the second largest turnout in all of Tarrant County outside of Fort Worth last November in a presidential election, passed every single one of these reforms by 86% to 14%. And so I think people view it the same way I do. And the goal there was to create the most rigid standard for transparency and ethics and conflict of interest available in the state. And we've actually been recognized now, by several organizations for having done that, to have a standard that's higher than what the state of Texas actually requires. So what has to happen now is, if you want to run for elected office or you're in a senior role, in government on staff in Colleyville, you have to disclose your real property interests. You have to disclose the types of business you do in our own community, and any time that there is a relationship with a vendor or anybody else that is actually has a monetary relationship with the city, you have to disclose if you have a personal relationship or any other sort of business interest.
Is this not applicable to not just senior staff members and individuals that are running for city council, but also, for example, the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Sure. I mean, so there's, the Planning and Zoning Commission obviously makes a lot of these decisions. Ultimately, they come to city council for approval, but, again, one of the dynamics that we're trying to prevent is just a flat-out conflict of interest, and having one special interest group, the folks that are, involved in that part of, the business in our town, making every decision. And the entire goal of the charterments was to ensure that minimally the voters have the information so they know who's serving them, they know what business that they're in, and they can, anticipate their motives on their own. And so at least the information is there now.